In the primordial era, before existence was more than a mere concept, there stretched an infinite abyss of chaos. This wasn't simple emptiness, but a swirling, shapeless potential. A darkness so profound that the very idea of darkness had yet to be conceived. In this foundational chasm, the initial stirrings of creation commenced their ancient ritual. From this chaos emerged the fundamental forces that would sculpt all of existence. The first to appear was Gaia, the Earth Mother. Her form solidifying from the void like a dream manifesting in the mind of a slumbering deity. As she drew her first breath, the act itself brought forth space, pushing back the limits of nothingness. Next came Tartarus, the deepest chasm, a gulf so immense that even Gaia's boundless depths could not encompass it. Unlike Gaia's nurturing embrace, Tartarus was the embodiment of cold and darkness. A place where light itself went to vanish. This was the proto-underworld, a realm of such terrifying profundity that a descent into it would take 9 days and 9 nights, and even then, one would not reach its absolute bottom. Bridging the expanse between the foundation and the void, Eros emerged. Not merely love as mortals would eventually understand it, but the fundamental force of attraction, the power that draws like to like, compelling the scattered dust of creation to coalesce into form. Eros stirred the emptiness, blending chaos with purpose, and desire with possibility. Thus began the grand work of creation, with Tartarus already established as the world beneath all worlds, patiently awaiting the inhabitants that would one day populate its abyssal depths. As the cosmic dance persisted, the primal forces began to assume definite shapes. Mother Earth, in her boundless creativity, gave birth to Uranus, the star-studded sky, who stretched himself above her like a protective mantle. Their union would give rise to the mighty Titans, the first divine children who would reign before the age of Olympus. Yet, even as creation thrived above, the great void below deepened further. Unlike the evolving upper realms, it remained unchanging, eternal, a dark mirror to the burgeoning brightness of the world. Here, in this lightless prison, the seeds of future retribution were sown. For what else was necessary for justice but a place where the guilty could be confined forever? Erebus and Nyx, night and darkness themselves, emerged from the primordial murk. They would bear their own offspring, Ether, the bright upper air, and Hemera, day, in the ceaseless cycle of light and shadow that would define mortal experience. Yet, Nyx maintained her ancient connection to Tartarus, her shadowy dominion intertwining with the depths in ways that would remain mysterious even to the gods themselves. Time flowed differently then, measured not in days, but in the rising and falling of divine ages. The Titans reigned under Cronus, who had overthrown his father Uranus in an act of cosmic violence. But fate, that weaver of inevitable narratives, had already spun the thread that would unravel Cronus's rule. Zeus, the youngest son, saved from his father's devouring hunger, grew mighty on Crete. When his time came, he gathered allies among the Titans and waged a war that shook the very foundations of reality. For 10 years, the cosmos trembled as the old guard clashed with the new. Thunder against earthquake, tradition against destiny. The battle's resolution came not through mere strength, but through cunning strategy. The youngest son descended into Tartarus, that ancient prison, and liberated the Cyclopes and Centimanes, whom Cronus had imprisoned there. These grateful beings forged for their liberator the weapons of victory, the thunderbolt that would become his eternal symbol of power. When the Titans finally fell, it was Tartarus itself that claimed them. The primordial deep, which had waited patiently through all the ages of creation, finally received its purpose. The defeated Titans were cast down into its hollows, where they would remain imprisoned, their rage becoming the foundation of all future suffering. In the aftermath of victory, the cosmos required new rulers. The 3 brother kings met to divide creation among themselves. Legend speaks of lots drawn from a bronze helm, chance deciding their respective dominions. Yet destiny has a way of making what must be appear accidental. The Skyfather claimed the heavens and sky, taking his throne atop Mount Olympus, where he could survey all creation. The Sea Lord received the vast waters, those regions where mystery dwelt beneath the waves. And to the eldest brother fell the dominion of the underworld and the kingdom of the dead. Some whisper that he drew the short lot, receiving the least desirable inheritance. Others say that sovereignty over death always belonged to the eldest, and that the lot was merely a formality. Whatever the truth, the new sovereign accepted his portion with the solemnity befitting one who would rule over all mortal endings. The journey downward was both physical and metaphysical. As the Dark Lord descended through layers of earth and rock, through caverns that seemed to swallow light itself, he was transforming. The god who had known the bright halls of Olympus was becoming something else, not darker, but deeper, more attuned to the weight of finality that would characterize his dominion. At last, he reached the heart of his new kingdom. Here, where pressure and darkness met in absolute marriage, the Death Ruler established his throne. Black obsidian and adamantine, materials that had never known light, formed his seat of power. Unlike the golden thrones of Olympus, this was substance made manifest, eternal, unyielding, and grave. Around his throne room, the space itself seemed to shift and adapt. Caverns expanded to accommodate the need for courts of judgment. Tunnels branched like arteries, creating pathways for the rivers that would soon flow. The architecture of death was taking shape, each element forming with inevitable purpose. The Lord of Death understood his role completely, while his brothers ruled domains of life and motion. His would be the land of silence and memory. No grudge clouded his acceptance, for did not all things, even gods, eventually find their way to his dominion? In his own time, in his own way. He was the most powerful of all, for none could ultimately escape his sovereignty. Thus was established the eternal order, sky, sea, and underworld, each ruled by its appointed lord. And thus began the long story of the depths below, where all tales ultimately end, and where new stories are forever beginning their dark gestation. The god of death did not merely inherit an empty cavern. His dominion required rivers to flow, guardians to stand watch, and boundaries to be drawn between the living and those who had crossed beyond. From the depths of this newly claimed dominion, waters began to emerge. Not ordinary waters, but essential currents that would define the nature of death itself. First to materialize was the Styx, most sacred of all underworld rivers. Born from hatred and divine necessity, its waters held power even the Olympians could not ignore. When gods sought to bind themselves with unbreakable oaths, they called upon the Styx, whose black current held the weight of permanence itself. To break such an oath meant forfeiting divine power for 9 cycles of the sun, a punishment so severe that even Zeus honored its authority. Next flowed Lethe, the river of forgetfulness. Its pale waters whispered of oblivion, carrying away memories as surely as time erodes stone. Souls who drank from Lethe found their earthly concerns dissolving, their past lives becoming as distant as dreams upon waking. Some would taste its waters deliberately, seeking release from painful memories. Others would slip into its current accidentally, losing themselves to its gentle erasure. Then came Acheron, the river of pain and woe, its waters thick with the echoes of mortal suffering. Dark currents carried the weight of human grief, creating a barrier between the living world above and the place of permanent rest below. Unlike Lethe's gentle disappearance, Acheron's passage was one of acknowledgement. Each soul must recognize their mortality, must feel the weight of their ending before continuing their journey. Forth emerged Phlegethon, the river of fire that blazed without consuming. Eternal flames danced across liquid surfaces that defied natural law, creating a torrent of heat that purified rather than destroyed. Those destined for punishment would eventually know its burning touch, while others might glimpse its light from safe distances. Reminded that some aspects of the divine remain beyond mortal understanding. Last to form was Cocytus, the river of lamentation. Here the essence of grief itself flowed as water, carrying the wails of those who mourned. Its icy current preserved the tears of the departed, creating a permanent record of sorrow that would forever echo through the halls of death. Cocytus marked the final boundary of Tartarus, where the most terrible punishments awaited those who had defied divine law. With the rivers established, the sovereign of the dead began populating his dominion with guardians and attendants, each chosen for their unique abilities to maintain order in this world of eternal transition. Charon, most ancient of ferrymen, answered the summons first. Decrepit in appearance, yet eternal in purpose, he took up his station at the shores of the Styx. His weathered hands learned to guide his boat across treacherous waters, while his hollow eyes developed the ability to recognize souls worthy of passage. The living feared his grim visage, but the dead came to see him as their first guide into the new existence beyond mortality. At the gates themselves materialized Cerberus, the three-headed hound, whose very existence challenged nature's laws. Each head served a purpose, one to guard against the living who might seek unauthorized entry, another to prevent the dead from attempting escape, and the third to welcome those whose time had truly come. His bark echoed through caverns with the resonance of finality itself, and even brave heroes would learn to respect the barriers he upheld. 3 figures emerged to serve as judges of the dead: Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus. Each had ruled kingdoms in the world above with wisdom and justice, and now their earthly experience qualified them to evaluate the lives of those who stood before them. Minos, with his lawgiver's mind, could untangle the most complex moral situations. Rhadamanthus brought strict adherence to principle, separating right from wrong with unwavering clarity. Aeacus, compassionate yet firm, understood the weight of circumstance while maintaining the standards of divine justice. Thanatos and Hypnos, death and sleep, took their places as essential forces rather than mere attendants. Thanatos moved through the upper world as inevitability incarnate, marking the end of every mortal thread at its appointed time. His twin brother brought gentler darkness, the small deaths of nightly rest that prepared mortals for their final transition. Together, they bridged the gap between consciousness and oblivion, creating the rhythm of mortal existence. The Erinyes, later known as the Furies, accepted their role as pursuers of wrongdoers. These ancient spirits, born from the blood of Uranus when Cronus first struck him down, now served a new master. Alecto, the unceasing one, Megira, the grudge-bearer, and Tisiphone, avenger of murder. Their names became whispered warnings among mortals. Unlike other denizens of the netherworld who waited for souls to arrive, the Erinyes moved freely between worlds, hunting those whose crimes demanded immediate attention. As these divine appointments continued, the physical structure of the underworld began to reflect its purpose. Stone walls rose without mortal hands, forming courts where judgment would take place. Waiting halls expanded to accommodate the endless stream of arriving souls. Passages carved themselves through rock, creating paths that different categories of the dead would follow to their ultimate destinations. The throne room itself evolved beyond its initial formation. Columns of pure darkness supported a ceiling lost in shadow, while the floor was paved with stones of remembrance, each reflecting glimpses of mortal lives that had passed through this chamber. Here, the Lord of the Dead would hear appeals, make pronouncements, and maintain the balance between mercy and justice that his role demanded. Around the edges of this constructed dominion, boundaries solidified. The walls between life and death, once permeable, now required specific passages and permissions. Gates of horn and ivory emerged, through which true dreams and false visions would occasionally drift upward to the sleeping world above. These boundaries ensured that the two planes remained properly separated, preventing chaos while allowing for the necessary connections that bound the cosmos together. Thus, piece by piece, the underworld transformed from an empty void into a fully realized kingdom. Each element served multiple purposes: the rivers as borders and passageways, the guardians as protectors and guides, the structure as both symbol and mechanism. The territory of death was becoming a mirror of the ordered world above, yet uniquely adapted to its eternal function. Through this careful construction, the ruler of the dead ensured that his dominion would serve not merely as a destination, but as a fundamental part of the cosmic order. Every mortal born into the world above would eventually find their path leading downward, following these established routes to whatever afterlife their deeds had earned them. The structure was complete. Now it awaited its first true inhabitants. As humanity multiplied upon the earth, the shadow of mortality followed in their footsteps. Disease, age, and misfortune claimed their first victims, and these souls, hesitant and bewildered, found themselves approaching the boundaries of the living world. No paths existed for their journey. No customs guided their passage. The newly minted kingdom of death stood ready, yet the protocols for entry remained unestablished. Children of Prometheus, shaped from clay and divine breath. These first souls drifted like mist between worlds. Some lingered near their bodies, unable to comprehend their state. Others wandered aimlessly, knowing they could not return to the lands of the living, but uncertain where to go next. The cosmic order demanded resolution. It was Hermes, messenger of the gods, who first recognized the need. As souls accumulated in the twilight spaces between planes, he approached his uncle with a proposal. His swift sandals, which carried him between Olympus and earth, could as easily guide the deceased on their final path. Thus began the tradition of Hermes Psychopompus, the conductor of souls, establishing the first official connection between mortal death and divine destination. The initial journeys were uncertain. Early souls resisted their transition, while others rushed too eagerly toward whatever lay beyond. Hermes learned to read each spirit, offering comfort to some and firmness to others. His role evolved from simple guide to counselor, explaining what awaited each soul and preparing them for the judgment they would face. As more mortals crossed the threshold, patterns emerged in the successful passages. Survivors watching their loved ones depart began to notice that certain practices eased the journey while others complicated it. Trial and error, guided by divine whispers and occasional direct intervention, gave birth to the fundamental customs of death. The obol, a single coin placed upon the tongue or eyelids of the deceased, became the first established ritual. Charon, whose boat required payment for passage, initially accepted whatever offerings family could provide. Yet the standardization of a single modest coin ensured that the poorest could afford passage while preventing the wealthy from corrupting the process with extravagant bribes. Burial itself emerged as a necessity rather than sentiment. The earliest souls discovered that without proper interment, they remained suspended between existences, unable to complete their journey, yet barred from returning to life. The earth must receive the body, completing the cycle of dust to dust before the spirit could pass fully into its new domain. Mourning rituals developed organically as the living sought to ease their grief while honoring their dead. Libations poured upon the ground created liquid connections between worlds. Funeral games celebrated the departed life while simultaneously acknowledging its end. Each custom that emerged served both practical and emotional purposes, binding the community of the living while facilitating the journey of the dead. Out of necessity and divine design, the journey of a soul became codified into distinct stages, each with its own purpose and challenge. Death arrives in many forms throughout the world above. Thanatos might come as a gentle hand upon the shoulder or as the sudden shock of violence. For some, the separation of body and spirit occurs gradually. For others, it happens in an instant. Yet, regardless of its method, death marks the beginning of transition rather than an ending. Once separated from mortal flesh, the soul finds itself in a liminal state, still connected to the physical world through memory and emotion, yet drawn inexorably toward its ultimate destination. It is here that Hermes appears, his presence both comfort and certainty. He does not force the journey, but guides with patience, allowing each soul time to bid its final farewells to the world above. The path to the Styx varies for each soul, reflecting their earthly life. Some travel swiftly through known landscapes before these familiar places fade into the misty boundaries between realities. Others must navigate symbolic terrain, crossing metaphorical mountains of regret or lakes of sorrow. Each journey serves as the soul's first processing of its own mortality. At the river's edge, the soul encounters Charon for the first time. The ancient ferryman's hollow gaze holds no judgment, merely recognition of another spirit requiring passage. The obol, properly placed by loved ones, ensures smooth crossing. Without it, the soul must wait 100 years upon the shores, a punishment for improper burial that emphasizes the importance of mortal ritual. The crossing itself becomes a meditation on transition. The waters of the Styx separate more than physical locations. They mark the boundary between mortal concerns and eternal perspective. Many souls report sensing the weight of their earthly existence dissolving during this passage, their priorities shifting as they approach the gates of their new existence. Cerberus greets each arrival with his three-headed scrutiny. The souls of the just pass easily, while those harboring guilt feel the weight of his judgment even before reaching the true courts. His presence serves as both guardian and preliminary assessment, ensuring that no living being infiltrates the afterlife while allowing the dead their rightful passage. Before the three judges, each soul faces the moment of ultimate truth. Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus sit in their appointed places, their divine sight penetrating beyond excuses and self-deception to the core essence of each life lived. The process varies according to the complexity of the soul. Simple lives, marked by clear virtue or obvious wickedness, receive swift judgment. More nuanced existences require careful examination, with each action weighed against circumstance and intention. The judges consult among themselves for difficult cases, their collective wisdom ensuring that justice prevails over mere technical interpretation of divine law. Stories began to circulate among the living about particularly notable judgments. The soldier who died honorably in battle was granted immediate passage to Elysium. The merchant who hoarded grain during famine was condemned to eternal hunger in the depths of Tartarus. These tales served both as warning and encouragement, shaping mortal behavior through the certainty of cosmic justice. Yet the ultimate destination, once announced, cannot be appealed. The word of the three judges stands final, their decision reflecting not just mortal law but the deeper harmony of cosmic order. Each soul receives exactly what their life has earned, not through arbitrary punishment or reward, but through the natural consequences of their choices made manifest in eternity. Thus the standard journey concludes with the soul directed to its final abode. The asphodel meadows await the majority, while special regions beckon to those marked by exceptional virtue or terrible vice. The protocols established by these first passages would endure for millennia, their necessity proven by the orderly procession of countless souls through the carefully constructed pathways of the dead. With judgment established and pathways defined, the geography of the afterlife began responding to divine will. Like clay taking form beneath the potter's hands, the underworld landscape shifted and evolved, creating distinct environments where different souls would spend eternity. Each territory emerged with its own character, its own light or absence thereof. The vast majority of souls require neither the bliss of reward nor the agony of punishment. For these, the common multitude who lived lives either extraordinary in virtue nor exceptional in wickedness, the asphodel meadows materialized like morning mist slowly taking form. Gray expanses stretched beyond mortal comprehension, where colorless flowers bloomed without fragrance, swaying in breezes that provided neither warmth nor chill. These endless plains offered neutrality incarnate, not suffering, but an eternal absence of the vivid sensations that defined mortal existence. The sky above remained perpetually dawn-like, neither bright enough to inspire nor dark enough to oppress. Here souls moved in gentle wandering, their forms mere echoes of their living selves. They drifted past each other like ghosts of memories, occasionally recognizing familiar faces, but finding themselves unable to rekindle the passionate connections of their previous lives. Time held no meaning where nothing changed. No seasons marked the passage of eternity. No growth or decay punctuated existence. The landscape itself seemed to exist in permanent neutrality. Streams of lukewarm water wound through fields that required no tending. Trees bore fruit that provided sustenance without pleasure. The very architecture of this domain ensured that souls experienced neither want nor fulfillment, a perfect balance that many living would consider the ultimate punishment, though it brought no active suffering. In stark contrast to the gray monotony of the asphodel plains, a territory of golden light began coalescing at the furthest edge of the underworld kingdom. Elysium manifested as the immortal reward for those who had proven themselves exceptional, whether through heroic deeds, divine favor, or lives lived with uncommon virtue. Here, eternal spring held dominion over gentle landscapes. The climate maintained a perfect warmth that neither oppressed nor chilled, while breezes carried the scent of ambrosia and eternal flowers. Trees bore fruit perpetually ripe yet never falling to decay. Streams of nectar wound through meadows where the grass yielded underfoot without being crushed, a province designed for comfort without monotony, different from the aimless wandering of other souls. The blessed inhabitants of Elysium found purpose in eternal pursuits. Warriors who had died gloriously engaged in mock battles where no one truly fell. Poets composed verses that captured divine truth. Athletes competed in games where victory brought honor without diminishing the defeated. Each soul could pursue whatever brought them fulfillment in life, now freed from mortal limitations. The blessed fields even offered connections between its inhabitants and the world above. Unlike other souls who forgot their mortal ties through Lethe's waters, Elysium's residents maintained awareness of their descendants and could occasionally influence events in the living world. They became ancestral spirits, guides who whispered wisdom and protection to their mortal lineage. Some souls found such contentment here that they voluntarily remained for eternity. Yet others chose to drink from Lethe's waters and return for additional lives, seeking to prove their virtue anew. This choice itself distinguished Elysium. It offered possibility where other regions offered only acceptance of fate. While pleasant territories formed above, the ancient pit continued evolving into the fundamental zone of punishment. Tartarus exceeded simple imprisonment. It became a domain designed for very specific torments matched precisely to each transgressor's crimes. The geography shifted according to necessity. Cliffs of obsidian rose to accommodate those who must push boulders for eternity. Lakes of fire formed for those who betrayed sacred hospitality. Wheels of burning bronze appeared for those who dared divine aspiration. This territory became a workshop where divine justice crafted perfect punishments, each one calibrated to reflect the precise nature of the crime committed. Tantalus discovered his eternal frustration first. A former king who served his own son as a feast for the gods. He found himself standing in a pool beneath fruit trees. When thirst drove him to drink, waters receded. When hunger made him reach for fruit, branches lifted beyond his grasp. This punishment, to desire eternally what remained perpetually beyond reach, became the archetype for divine retribution. Sisyphus, master of cunning, who twice escaped death through cleverness, learned that even knowledge had its limits. His boulder, perfectly sized for one man to move, proved impossible to push beyond the hilltop's crest. Each nearly successful attempt ended in failure as the stone rolled back, requiring him to begin again. The punishment captured perfectly the futility of trying to outsmart the cosmic order itself. Ixion's wheel of fire punished hubris in motion rather than stillness. Bound to its burning spokes for attempting to seduce the divine queen, he spun eternally, knowing no rest except the brief moments when flames died to embers before reigniting. His punishment became a model for those who confused mortal status with divine privilege. The Danaids, those 50 sisters who murdered their husbands on their wedding night, faced eternal frustration. Compelled to fill a massive jar using vessels with holes, they experienced the futility of seeking redemption for premeditated violence. Their punishment suggested that some crimes created their own endless cycles, requiring the soul to repeat its failure until it understood the immutable nature of justice. Each punishment served multiple purposes: specific torment for the guilty, warning for potential transgressors, and demonstration that divine justice operated beyond mortal comprehension. The area expanded as necessary, generating new torments for unique crimes while maintaining its essential character as the ultimate judicial chamber of the cosmos. Tartarus reached its full complexity when different levels emerged within its depths. The greater the crime, the deeper its punishment. Betrayers of families sank lowest of all, where even the dim light that penetrated upper levels could not reach. The architecture of agony became a reflection of moral hierarchy, ensuring that souls faced consequences proportional to their misdeeds. As these distinct provinces established themselves, boundaries between them crystallized. No simple walls could separate such different zones of existence. Instead, the fabric of the afterlife itself shifted in quality from one region to another. Rivers continued serving as transition zones. Souls bound for the asphodel meadows found themselves carried by gentle currents that gradually muted their memories of mortal life. Those destined for Elysium experienced waters that refreshed rather than diminished, preparing them for the enhanced existence that awaited. The darkest souls facing Tartarus discovered that the rivers themselves reflected their punishment. Phlegethon's burning waters offer no passage, only a preview of the eternal fire that awaited. Cocytus froze the more deeply they attempted to cross, its icy grip increasing with moral weight. Geographic features emerged that served as landmarks and barriers. The plane of judgment formed a neutral ground where souls could contemplate their lives before final assignment. Hills of remembrance offered elevated views of different regions, allowing souls to understand fully what they were leaving behind or approaching. Passageways appeared that prevented inappropriate crossings. Souls from one zone could not traverse into another without divine permission, a necessary limitation that ensured the justice of each assignment remained intact. These passages shifted and changed according to need, creating a dynamic geography that reflected the living nature of cosmic justice. Thus, the underworld transformed from a single domain into a complex tapestry of interrelated territories. Each zone fulfilled its purpose within the greater whole, ensuring that every soul found exactly what their life had earned them. The architecture of the afterlife had achieved its final form, ready to serve the endless procession of mortal endings that would follow. The cosmic order had taken definite shape. Yet, the realm of death remained strangely solitary. While his brothers ruled with divine consorts by their sides, the Master of Shadows presided alone over his domain. The weight of this solitude would soon reshape not just his dominion, but the very rhythm of mortal existence upon the earth above. In the world of light, Demeter's daughter wandered through fields of eternal spring. Persephone, whose name meant bringer of destruction, picked flowers among the narcissus and crocus, her young laughter echoing across meadows that knew no winter. She moved through the living world as life's promise incarnate. Maiden rather than mother, spring rather than autumn, possibility rather than memory. From the depths below, eyes observed her dance through sunlit fields. The solitude of the underworld had grown heavy upon its monarch, and in Persephone's graceful movements, he recognized a kindred spirit, one who moved between light and darkness, whose very name spoke of transformation. With Zeus's silent consent, but Demeter's ignorance, the plan formed. The earth cracked open like a hungry mouth as the maiden reached for a particularly beautiful bloom. From this chasm emerged a chariot of ebony, drawn by steeds whose breath came as mist, whose hooves struck sparks from the air itself. Before her startled cry could fully form, Persephone found herself swept into darkness deeper than any she had known, carried by arms that radiated the chill of eternity. The journey downward occurred in heartbeats, yet stretched like eternities. Persephone glimpsed caverns that swallowed light, rivers that flowed contrary to nature's laws, and denizens who moved as shadows among shadows. Her abductor remained silent, his face grim with the knowledge of what this action set in motion. Not just personal desire, but cosmic necessity demanding its due. The harvest goddess sensed her daughter's absence before any mortal cry could reach her ears. Demeter's divine nature resonated with the wound torn in the fabric of mother-child connection. Her search began immediately, taking her from mountain peak to ocean depth, questioning every creature and spirit along her desperate path. As her search continued fruitless, something fundamental shifted in the earth's fertility. Fields that had been green began to pale. their life essence draining like breath from a dying creature. Animals ceased to mate and give birth. Rivers slowed to sullen trickles. The very soil seemed to steel itself against producing nourishment, matching its goddess's growing desolation. Demeter's wandering took her to realms both mortal and divine. She questioned Helios, the sun god who sees all beneath the sky. She sought wisdom from Hecate, the witch goddess who knew the paths between worlds. Each answer brought her closer to truth, though none provided the reunion she desperately sought. Meanwhile, humanity watched in growing horror as their harvests withered and their livestock weakened. 9 days and nights she searched without rest, taking neither ambrosia nor nectar, her divine radiance dimming with each fruitless hour. When at last the truth emerged that her brother had sanctioned her daughter's seizure, Demeter's rage transformed the world. No longer would the earth bear fruit. Let gods and mortals alike experience the barrenness that matched her heart. The famine spread like a disease across the living world. Cities that had flourished began to starve. Temples stood empty as farmers abandoned fields that would not yield. The cosmic balance teetered on the edge of catastrophe, for without mortal worship and sacrifice, even the Olympians would feel the pinch of diminished power. Eventually, Zeus recognized that catastrophe approached. The king of gods could not allow mortality to perish entirely. For then who would honor the divine? Hermes received his commission as messenger, tasked with retrieving the maiden from the depths. Yet the laws of the cosmos operated according to principles even Zeus could not ignore. The messenger descended through the now familiar paths to his uncle's court. There he found not the grief-stricken captive he expected, but a young goddess beginning to understand the power of her new domain. Persephone had eaten, some accounts say 3, others 7 seeds of the pomegranate, that fruit whose red flesh mimicked the color of life itself. This simple act bound her to the kingdom below. According to ancient law, one cannot partake of the food of the dead and return unchanged to the living. Yet neither could the world above continue without Demeter's blessing. A solution demanded compromise, a balance between absolute extremes. The agreement struck contained the wisdom of necessity. Persephone would spend equal time in both worlds, part of each year ascending to rejoin her mother and the world of light, part returning to rule beside her shadowy husband in the depths below. The exact division varied by account. Some spoke of equal halves, others of a third in darkness and 2/3 in light. This cosmic contract created the rhythm that would define mortal experience. When Persephone rose from the underworld each spring, Demeter's joy manifested in the earth's renewal. Flowers bloomed, creatures mated, and fields became fertile once more. When the daughter queen descended again, her mother's sorrow turned the world toward autumn and winter, as life retreated deep beneath the earth's surface. The union between dark sovereign and spring maiden created more than seasonal change. Within the shadowy halls of death, a different kind of power blossomed. Persephone, no longer the innocent wanderer of flowered fields, developed into a figure of dual nature. She retained the warmth of spring, but gained the authority of endings. As queen of the dead, she brought changes to the afterlife itself. Her presence softened some aspects of the empire while deepening others. The bleakness of the asphodel meadows gained subtle variations of gray. Elysium developed new gardens where blessed souls could tend plants that bloomed with memory's fragrance. Even punishment in Tartarus gained the context of seasons, moments of respite. When Persephone's influence made the eternal torments pause, if only briefly, the marriage also established new protocols for the living's interaction with the dead. Persephone became an intercessor of sorts, more approachable than her stern husband. Mothers who lost children could pray to her for comfort, knowing she understood the pain of separation. Those seeking to contact departed loved ones found her more likely to grant brief meetings during the hours when she walked the threshold between worlds. In this sacred union, ancient powers combined in new ways. The earth's fertility now carried the weight of inevitable endings. Each blade of grass contained the seed of its own decay. Every birth implied death. and every death carried the promise of renewal. The cosmic dance had found its eternal rhythm, with Persephone moving as the living thread connecting above and below. Her throne, carved from crystalline stone that held light within its depths, stood beside the obsidian seat of her shadowy spouse. Together they ruled the sanctum of endings. She with the understanding of life's vitality, he with the grave knowledge of its inevitable conclusion. Their court became the fullest expression of the duality that governed existence itself. Thus the underworld gained not just a queen but a bridge between kingdoms that had previously stood in stark separation. Through her, the living and dead maintained perpetual connection, and the world above found meaning in the pattern of its own seasons. The cosmic order had achieved a wholeness it had previously lacked, with even death itself participating in the endless cycle of renewal. The rhythm of seasons had been established. Yet the boundaries between the living and dead were not merely observed. They were challenged. Throughout the ages, certain figures would dare to breach the divide, their journeys creating legends that echoed through both realms. These heroes, driven by love, duty, or divine command, would discover that death's domain held passages for the living, though their costs remained steep. Among mortal champions, none possessed the strength to match the son of Zeus. When King Eurystheus commanded his 12th and final labor, to bring Cerberus himself to the world above, even the hardened heroes gathered at the royal court gasped in disbelief. None had ever returned from attempting to restrain Death's guardian, let alone triumph over him. The hero's preparation for this descent differed markedly from previous quests. Rather than armor and weapons, he wrapped himself in the lion's skin that offered protection from both natural and supernatural forces. His divine heritage manifested not in rage this time, but in careful diplomacy as he approached the shadowy borders. Athena and Hermes accompanied him on the initial descent, their divine presences allowing him to pass the first guardians without conflict. They guided him to recognize the difference between inhabitants and prisoners, between willing residents and those trapped by circumstance. The hero learned quickly that in this realm knowledge served better than force. When at last he stood before the three-headed monster, Heracles offered the respect due to one performing essential duty. He requested permission for the trial rather than demanding passage through violence. This approach caught the attention of the Death Lord himself, who set a condition: the hero must subdue Cerberus using neither weapons nor divine artifacts, only his own strength and will. The wrestling match that followed shook the foundations of the darkest caves. 3 sets of jaws snapped toward the hero's throat as the serpent tail struck like lightning. Heracles gripped the thick necks, focusing his legendary strength while avoiding the venomous bites. The grappling continued for what seemed like eternities until gradually the mighty hound recognized strength greater than his own. Victory belonged to the mortal son of gods. But wisdom came in the aftermath. Heracles understood that this triumph could not remain permanent. Cerberus belonged in his station, maintaining the cosmic order. The hero's journey to the surface brought temporary disruption. Mortals scattered in terror at the sight of Death's guardian beneath open sky. But Heracles honored his commitment by returning the beast to his rightful post. While strength could force passage to the realm below, music possessed powers more subtle yet equally compelling. Orpheus, whose lyre could charm stones and tame wild beasts, discovered that even the hardened hearts of immortals could yield to perfect melody when sorrow provided the source. The death of Eurydice came swiftly, a serpent's bite during the marriage celebration itself. The famed musician watched his beloved fade before his vows could fully be spoken, and in his grief conceived a plan that seemed impossible to any but himself. His divine heritage, through Calliope, chief of muses, granted him confidence that his gift could accomplish what force could never achieve. His descent followed different paths than warriors took. Orpheus needed no guide, for his music created its own illumination in the darkness. The ferry across the Styx required no coin. Charon found himself rowing in time to melodies that spoke of life's fleeting beauty. Cerberus, rendered docile by songs of loneliness and loss, permitted passage without challenge. Before the throne of shadows, Orpheus wove his masterpiece. His lyre sang of love that transcended mortality, of devotion that could not accept death's finality. The notes carried memories of shared joys and the promise of future happiness denied by fate's cruel timing. For the first time in eternities, tears gathered in divine eyes as the ruler of death found himself moved by mortal emotion. Persephone, fresh from the world above, added her voice to the plea. She recognized in Orpheus's devotion the same love that had bound her to Demeter, the same force that made her annual separation so painful. The King of Shadows, swayed by his queen's gentle urging and the musician's extraordinary talent, granted the unprecedented Eurydice's return to life. Yet divine mercy came wrapped in caution. One condition bound the gift. Orpheus must lead the way without looking back until both stood in sunlight's full warmth. Trust in the divine promise must be complete, faith unwavering. The musician accepted eagerly, hearing his beloved's steps behind him as they climbed through winding passages toward the surface. The final moments proved fate's cruelty. Just as the first rays of sunlight touched his face, doubt crept into Orpheus's heart. The silence behind him seemed too complete. In the fatal instant before emerging fully into life, he turned to ensure Eurydice followed and watched in horror as she dissolved back into shadow. His cry of anguish echoed between realms, a sound so pure in its grief that it changed the very acoustics of the underworld. No second chance would come. The laws of death, once bent, could not break entirely. Orpheus returned alone to the world above, his music forever changed by the knowledge of what he had gained and lost. His subsequent wanderings, his eventual death at the hands of those who could not bear beauty tinged with such sorrow, all stemmed from this one look backward, this moment when doubt overcame divine trust. Where love moved the gods to mercy, hubris invited their wrath. Two heroes, bound by friendship and overweening pride, conceived a plan so audacious it challenged the fundamental order itself. To abduct not just any divine maidens, but the very queen of the underworld herself. Their plan developed through what seemed like logical progression. Having successfully challenged monsters and defeated enemies, they believed themselves worthy of divine brides. Pirithous proposed first that they abduct Helen of Sparta, daughter of Zeus by a mortal mother. This first crime succeeded through force and deception, though they agreed Helen would go to Theseus as his compensation for helping with the greater prize. The descent for Persephone began boldly. The heroes believed their reputations preceded them, that tales of their deeds had impressed even the ruler of shadows. They expected honor befitting champions, perhaps even respectful negotiation for the queen's hand. Their confidence blinded them to the impossibility of their goal. That no mortal could possess one who ruled by divine right. The reception they received carried the weight of cosmic mockery. The Death Lord offered them seats befitting noble guests. The chair of forgetfulness. Its magical properties bound them instantly, their flesh growing into the living stone as memory drained from their minds like water through broken vessels. They became part of the furniture itself, eternal warnings against divine transgression. While they sat trapped in growing amnesia, the King of Shadows orchestrated his own lesson. Servants laid banquets before the paralyzed heroes, feasts they could see but not touch. Persephone would pass by occasionally, her majestic bearing a constant reminder of the folly that brought them low. Time lost meaning as they became permanent fixtures, their legendary strength as useless as mortal weapons in this realm. Heracles, during his own descent for the 12th labor, happened upon his cousin Theseus. The hero found himself caught between friendship and respect for divine order. Using strength augmented by divine heritage, he managed to wrench Theseus free, though not without cost. The king of Athens left portions of flesh behind, bearing eternal scars from his foolhardiness. Pirithous remained forever in that seat, his ambition earning him permanent residence in the very realm he thought to conquer. The chair became part of underworld architecture, a cautionary tale given physical form. Future souls would pass by and wonder at the figure frozen in stone, a testament to mortal hubris meeting divine justice. Where heroes failed through strength or pride, a mortal succeeded through humility and in love. Psyche, whose beauty caught the attention of Venus herself, found herself caught in divine intrigue that would ultimately lead to immortality through proper supplication. The goddess of love, jealous of mortal beauty rivaling her own, commanded her son, Cupid, to make Psyche fall in love with the vilest creature imaginable. Yet the young god, seeing the maiden's true loveliness, accidentally wounded himself with his own arrow. Thus began a divine romance hidden in shadow and mystery, with Psyche loving an unseen husband who visited only in darkness. When betrayed by family curiosity into breaking the sacred taboo, Psyche lost both lover and the palace of dreams where they had lived in bliss. Seeking reconciliation with Venus, she found herself subjected to impossible tasks, each designed to confirm her unworthiness. The final challenge struck at the heart of divine pride: fetch beauty from Persephone herself. Armed with divine advice passed secretly by sympathetic gods, Psyche made her descent more carefully than heroes who preceded her. She carried special provisions: barley cakes to pacify Cerberus, coins for Charon's fare. More importantly, she brought instructions to resist temptation: ignore the lame man asking help with his donkey, refuse the drowning hand that begged assistance, reject the feast laid before her by Persephone's servants. Each avoided temptation tested different aspects of her character. Compassion might have meant her doom, yet cold determination served the greater purpose. When she finally stood before the underworld queen, her humility proved more disarming than any hero's strength. Persephone, seeing in the mortal maiden a reflection of her own struggles between realms, readily granted the requested gift of beauty contained within a sealed box. The return journey demanded equal care, with one final prohibition: not to open the divine container herself. Yet feminine curiosity, the same trait that lost her divine husband, proved her near undoing. Unable to resist the promise of heavenly beauty, Psyche opened the box to find not cosmetic enhancement, but Stygian sleep, a death-like stupor meant for goddesses to borrow, not for mortals to experience. Only Cupid's intervention saved her, having begged his father Zeus for permission to claim his love openly. The young couple's ascension to Olympus transformed Psyche from mortal to immortal, her trials earning divine status where heroes' strength had failed to achieve the same. Her story became a template, showing that proper approach, humble acceptance of divine will, could achieve what force and pride could never accomplish. While most heroes sought the realm of death for personal gain, some descended seeking wisdom for the greater good. Odysseus, trapped and wandering by vengeful Poseidon, required prophetic guidance that only the dead could provide. His journey to the edge of the world, where day meets night at Erebus borders, would reveal secrets vital to his return home. Unlike others, he need not fully enter death's domain. Instead, he performed rites at the boundary, drawing spirits to him through sacrifice and ritual. The hero dug a trench with his bronze sword, poured libations of honey, wine, and water, then sprinkled white barley. He summoned the spirits of the dead by calling them forth while offering animal sacrifice, letting their blood fill the trench. The first to appear was Elpenor, his recently dead companion, who died unsung on Circe's island. This encounter immediately taught Odysseus the importance of proper burial. Even death's realm operated through codes of honor and respect. He promised the proper funeral rites, establishing that the living maintained duties to the dead, even across the cosmic divide. His mother, Anticlea, came next, her shade revealing that news of her son's return had never reached Ithaca. Her grief at his prolonged absence had hastened her own death, a burden that weighed upon the hero's conscience. Through tears, she could only acknowledge him after drinking the blood that gave temporary substance to ghostly forms. Agamemnon's spirit brought warnings. His Clytemnestra had murdered him upon return from Troy, teaching Odysseus to approach his own homecoming with caution. Achilles appeared, teaching a lesson about glory versus life itself. Better to serve as a slave among the living than rule the legions of the dead. The prophet Tiresias, blind in life and death alike. Yet seeing clearer than any, revealed the path home. His prophecy came with warnings about the sirens, Scylla and Charybdis, and the sacred cattle of Helios. Most importantly, he foretold the need for further pilgrimage even after regaining Ithaca, for Poseidon's wrath required additional appeasement. Ajax the Lesser appeared last, still nursing the grudge from their quarrel over Achilles' armor. Though Odysseus pleaded for reconciliation, some souls preferred their anger to peace, maintaining their earthly passions beyond mortality. This reminded the hero that death did not automatically bring wisdom or forgiveness. Souls carried their essential selves into the shadowed realm. The Nicaea concluded as the uncountable multitude of shades began approaching, drawn by blood that gave them temporary coherence. Odysseus, understanding that some mysteries remained too terrible for mortal comprehension, hastily returned to his ship. His descent had granted necessary knowledge while revealing that death's secrets were best experienced in their proper time. Among all mortal descents, none carried greater cosmic significance than Aeneas's passage to the underworld. Guided by the Cumaean Sibyl through the entrance at Lake Avernus, the Trojan hero sought not personal gain, but knowledge of his people's destiny. His journey would literally map the future of Rome across the landscape of death. The Sibyl's preparations differed from those of previous descenders. She required Aeneas to obtain the golden bough, sacred to Diana and a passport to underworld realms. This mystical branch, plucked from the dark grove near Cumae, became the prototypical symbol for mortal authority to enter death's domain, not through strength or music, but through possession of the correct divine token. His guided tour through the afterlife carried educational purpose. The Sibyl pointed out specific areas where infant souls waited, where the wrongly accused found justice, where those who died for love received comfort. Aeneas witnessed the judgment process in detail, understanding divine justice as a complex system rather than simple reward and punishment. The fields of mourning affected him deeply as he encountered Dido, the queen he had abandoned in pursuance of his destiny. Her refusal to acknowledge him, turning away to rejoin her first husband's shade, taught the lasting power of betrayed love. Some wounds, even divine mission, could not heal entirely. In the blessed groves of Elysium, Aeneas finally found his father, Anchises. Their reunion carried both personal joy and prophetic revelation. Anchises explained the soul's process of purification and reincarnation, pointing out the future heroes of Rome waiting to be born. He revealed names that would echo through history: Romulus, Caesar, Augustus, showing destiny made manifest through genealogical vision. The philosophy Anchises imparted revolutionized underworld understanding. Souls underwent cycles of purification and return, gathering wisdom through multiple lives until achieving final rest in eternal light. This concept of reincarnation, blended with traditional Greek afterlife, would influence both Roman religious thought and later philosophical traditions. The exit from the underworld carried its own significance. While others had struggled to return through the paths they entered, Aeneas emerged through the gates of ivory, the portal of false dreams. This puzzling choice suggested that even prophetic truth carried elements of deception or multiple interpretation, that the future shown required human action to manifest correctly. His ascent reconnected him with divine purpose. The underworld journey had transformed him from refugee leader to founder of a nation. The visions granted perspective, understanding that his personal losses served a greater destiny, that the fall of Troy enabled the rise of Rome. This profound acceptance of cosmic order equipped him for the challenges that would forge an empire. Thus, these heroic descents established the principle that death's realm, while forbidden to the living, remained accessible under proper circumstances. Each journey left its mark on both realms, changing underworld protocols while providing crucial knowledge to the world above. The stories served as templates, teaching that approach mattered more than might, that respect for divine order trumped mortal desire, and that sometimes the journey to death brought life's deepest understanding. These heroic passages revealed the realm of death to be more than a static destination. As mortal understanding grew through these legendary journeys, the shadowed domain itself expanded in scope and character. New divine presences emerged, minor deities took their stations, and the mythology surrounding death developed layers that reflected the deepening Greek theological imagination. Beyond the central figures who had ruled since the cosmic division, other immortal powers found their roles within the death realm's expanding hierarchy. These additions reflected both the complexity of death itself and the growing sophistication of mortal understanding. Hecate, ancient goddess of crossroads and magic, established her authority at the thresholds where worlds intersected. Her position differed from resident deities. She moved freely between realms, her triple form equally at home beneath earth, upon land, and in the heavens above. Her torches illuminated the darkest passages, while her knowledge encompassed both the hidden paths to death's domain and the secret ways back to life. The crossroads she governed were both literal and metaphorical. Physically, they marked the places where multiple paths converged in the underworld's complex geography. Spiritually, they represented moments of choice that determined souls' ultimate fates. Hecate became patron of those who worked at these boundaries, necromancers, midwives, and others who dealt with beginnings and endings. Her ritual practices brought new elements to interaction with the dead. Monthly offerings at three-way crossroads evolved into elaborate ceremonies. The dietna, suppers consisting of garlic, fish, honey cakes, and eggs, served as communion meals shared between living and departed. These rites established protocols for sustained contact that earlier ages had not imagined possible. Milanoi manifested as a figure both terrible and sacred, her role emerging from the darker aspects of Persephone's dual nature. When the spring goddess descended to her winter throne, sometimes she bore daughters who inherited specific attributes. Milanoi embodied the nightmare aspect of the underworld, emerging to bring madness and terror to those who had escaped proper justice during life. Unlike spirits bound to the shadowed realm, Milanoi moved primarily in the world above, her appearance heralding breakdowns of mortal reason. She appeared as a figure half draped in darkness, half illuminated by moonlight, her presence inducing the kind of waking terror previously associated only with guilty dreams. Some traditions identified her as the child Persephone bore to Zeus in secret, conceived during one of the Skyfather's transformations into Death's likeness. Her relationship with proper justice was complex. She targeted not just the wicked, but those whose guilt remained unacknowledged or unpunished by human law. Her visitations could drive kings to confess secret crimes or cause murderers to reveal themselves through madness. In this way, she served as an extension of underworld justice into the mortal sphere. The Moirai, Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos maintained their ancient authority while developing deeper connections to Death's realm. These fates, who spun, measured, and cut the threads of mortal life, held dominion over when souls would arrive at the shadowed gates. Even the ruler of death recognized their authority, for they answered to no temporal power. Their operations existed outside linear time. In their cavern at the world's edge, they witnessed past, present, and future simultaneously. When a soul arrived in the underworld, its destined path had already been woven into the cosmic tapestry. This predestination did not eliminate judgment's necessity, but rather ensured that each soul's ultimate destination aligned with the pattern they had always intended. Their tools developed mythological significance beyond mere metaphor. Clotho's spindle drew material from the infinite possibility of unformed souls. Lachesis' measuring rod determined the length and character of each mortal span. Atropos' shears, made from metals that did not exist in the mortal world, could cut any thread, regardless of its supposed strength or protective enchantments. Nyx herself maintained her ancient connections to the underworld domain. This primordial night, mother of both Thanatos and Hypnos, served as a bridge between the earliest chaos and the ordered cosmos. Her dark robe, speckled with stars, could grant passage through barriers that even divine authority sometimes could not breach. Her dwelling at the edge of darkness existed in multiple locations simultaneously: a cavern entrance near the realm of death, a palace beyond the Garden of Atlas, and stations along the night sky's progression. From these vantage points she observed both mortal and immortal actions, sometimes offering counsel to the ruler of shadows when cosmic precedent conflicted with present justice. As the underworld's mythology matured, numerous minor figures emerged, each contributing threads to the complex narrative tapestry of Death's domain. Their stories often began in the world above, but found resolution below, creating bridges between realms that enriched the overall mythological framework. Alcestis' tale became paradigmatic for voluntary death in place of another. When death came for King Admetus, his devoted wife offered herself as substitute, transforming the family tragedy into a test of divine boundaries. Apollo, who had received hospitality from the royal household, had negotiated death's postponement on condition of finding a replacement. The journey downward proceeded with unusual elements, unlike those who resisted their fate. Alcestis walked willingly to claim her husband's destined place. Her arrival caused uncertainty among the realm's guardians. Here was one choosing death not from defeat or punishment, but from love's triumph. The usual protocols seemed insufficient for such unprecedented devotion. Her eventual rescue by Heracles during one of his adventures added layers to the story. The hero's wrestling match with Death himself created new precedent. Even Thanatos could be overpowered when divine will and mortal virtue aligned properly. Alcestis' return to life carried metaphorical weight. One who had touched death, yet returned, became a living symbol of sacrifice rewarded. Ajax the Lesser suffered eternal punishment for hubris of a different order. After the sack of Troy, he had dragged Cassandra from Athena's altar, violating the sacred sanctuary that should have protected the prophetess. Though escaping immediate death, his crime demanded cosmic justice that mortal courts could not provide. During his sea voyage home, Athena stirred storms that wrecked his ships. Yet in defying both divine punishment and the sea itself, Ajax's pride pushed boundaries further. He boasted that he would survive despite the gods' will, that mortal strength could overcome any divine plan. This final blasphemy triggered his destruction. As Poseidon split the very rock to which he clung, his shade in the underworld bore unique characteristics. While most spirits accepted their fate post-mortem, Ajax maintained his defiance eternally. He refused to enter the established afterlife regions, instead haunting the margins between areas, a perpetual reminder that some souls resist cosmic order even after death. His example showed that personality could persist beyond corporeal dissolution. Minth's transformation created a different kind of underworld legend. This water nymph, dwelling near the river Cocytus, caught the attention of the realm's dark king. Their relationship preceded his union with Persephone, representing early connections between the death domain and the living world's natural powers. When Persephone arrived as queen, she discovered evidence of prior affection and responded with divine jealousy. Different versions varied the specific method. Was it Demeter who trampled Mintha into aromatic herbs, or Persephone herself who accomplished the transformation? The result remained consistent. The nymph became the mint plant, her essence seeping into the winds that flowed between upper and lower worlds. The herb's properties carried metaphorical significance. Its strong scent could mask the odor of decay associated with death's realm. Its stimulating properties helped maintain awareness during descents into shadow depths. Its persistence in growing, even in poor conditions, suggested nature's ability to flourish despite proximity to death's domain. Orpheus's eventual arrival in the underworld created resonance with his earlier descent. After wandering as a broken poet, rejected by the world that had witnessed his failure, he met death at the hands of Maenads during a Dionysian revel. The spirits of murdered muses tore him apart, scattering pieces that would eventually reunite in the shadowed realm. His reception differed markedly from his first visit. Instead of standing as supplicant before the thrones of judgment, he took place among the blessed in Elysium. His tragic fate and divine heritage earned him special consideration, while his musical gifts continued to enrich the afterlife. Yet reuniting with Eurydice proved complex. She had moved beyond direct reach, transformed by time and experience in ways that even Orpheus's music could not bridge completely. These subsidiary stories enriched the underworld's texture, showing how personal dramas played out against the backdrop of cosmic law. Each tale contributed nuance to the established order. Alcestis proving that love could temporarily override death's claim, Ajax demonstrating that defiance could persist beyond mortal dissolution. Minda showing transformation's power at the boundary of realms, and Orpheus completing his journey from mortal artist to eternal resident. As the underworld matured, its primary inhabitants' roles evolved beyond their initial definitions. The realm's complexity demanded specialization, with deities developing specific functions that address the increasingly sophisticated relationship between the living and the dead. The Erinyes transformed from simple avengers into agents of gradual purification, while maintaining their traditional pursuit of the unpunished guilty. They developed methods for eventual reconciliation. The caverns where they tormented wrongdoers became classrooms where souls learned to comprehend their crimes' full implications. This educational aspect suggested that even the most terrible punishments served ultimate purposes rather than mere retribution. Their methodology expanded to include graduated intensity. Those who showed genuine remorse faced lighter trials than the completely unrepentant. They began working in conjunction with the judges to create punishment programs tailored to specific offenses. Murder within families still received the harshest treatment, but even these souls had now theoretical paths to eventual peace. The ferryman Charon's duties expanded beyond simple transportation. As experience accumulated through ferrying countless souls, he developed the ability to read spiritual conditions, to sense which arrivals carried proper burial rites versus those who would wait a century on the shore. His boat itself gained semi-sentient qualities, responding to moral weight by sailing smoothly for the just while becoming dangerously unstable for the murderous. He began serving as preliminary counselor during the crossing, his taciturn nature occasionally breaking to offer wisdom distilled from observing millions of mortal endings. Some souls arrived thinking death marked an ending. Charon's experience taught them to view it as transition. His role expanded into psychological preparation for the judgment to come. Cerberus likewise evolved beyond mere guard. His three heads developed distinct personalities and purposes, one that recognized legitimate passages, one that detected unauthorized entries, and one that sent souls trying to escape their assigned realms. This specialization made him less a simple barrier and more a complex filter, ensuring the correct flow of spirits according to divine law. The great hound's bark developed variations matching his function. Souls arriving with proper escort heard only a low rumble acknowledging their right to pass. Living heroes attempting unauthorized entry received the full force of his terrifying howl. His presence alone became a teacher, instructing arrivals that death's realm operated through established protocols rather than arbitrary power. Persephone's role deepened beyond seasonal passages to become advocate for specific souls. Her experience of violent separation from the world above gave her unique sympathy for those whose deaths came suddenly or unjustly. She developed interventions that could ease particular sufferings without disrupting the greater order of justice. Her court sessions evolved into opportunities for special pleading. Mothers who died in childbirth might receive her particular attention. Those who sacrificed themselves for others found in her a powerful supporter during judgment. Her influence never overruled the fundamental justice of the realm, but added mercy's dimension to what might otherwise be rigid application of cosmic law. The king himself grew from a figure of terrifying finality into something more complex: judge, administrator, and guarantor of cosmic balance. His authority expanded to include not just ruling over the dead, but ensuring that death itself served its proper function in the broader universe. He became the guarantor that endings arrived at their appointed times, either too early nor too late. His court developed beyond simple pronouncements into careful investigation. Complex cases now received full hearings where souls could present their life circumstances. His judgments began incorporating understanding that mortal existence rarely offered clear moral choices. That lives were woven from countless threads of intention, circumstance, and consequence. Thus, the underworld's divine inhabitants grew into roles that balanced justice with understanding, punishment with possibility for redemption, and finality with acknowledgement of existence's complexity. The realm of death had achieved a sophistication matching the mortal understanding that sought to comprehend it, creating a theological system where endings served beginning and death illuminated life's essential meaning. The underworld's complexity had grown beyond simple destination for the dead. It became a source of sacred wisdom that could transform mortal life itself. Various mystery traditions emerged, each offering initiates special understanding of death's nature, and through this knowledge, altered perspective on existence itself. These secret rites created bridges between popular religion and philosophical inquiry, between myth and mystical experience. At Eleusis, a small city northwest of Athens, the ancient story of Persephone's descent crystallized into rituals that promised transformative insight. These mysteries, celebrated for nearly 2,000 years, drew adherents from across the Greek world. Kings and commoners alike sought initiation into secrets that offered not just hope for a better afterlife, but changed understanding of life's purpose. The lesser mysteries, held in early spring at Agra, served as preliminary purification. Initiates underwent cleansing in river waters, sacrificed young pigs as substitute offerings, and learned basic mythological narratives that framed the greater revelations to come. These preparatory rites ensured that participants approached the greater mysteries with appropriate reverence and readiness. The journey to Eleusis for the autumn festival followed the path Demeter supposedly took while searching for her lost daughter. Pilgrims walked the sacred way, stopping at designated shrines where they performed specific rituals. The procession itself became a moving meditation on separation and reunion as participants physically retraced divine footsteps along the sacred road. Within the telesterion, the great hall of initiation, the highest mysteries unfolded. Though participants took binding oaths of secrecy, certain elements can be reconstructed from fragments and illusions. Central to the experience was the enactment of Persephone's story through sacred drama. Initiates witnessed representations of descent, separation, searching, and reunion that carried metaphorical weight beyond their literal narrative. The climactic revelation involved what was called the things shown, demeana. This visual component likely included sacred objects displayed in dramatic lighting, perhaps replicas of the items Persephone encountered in the underworld or symbols representing the journey between life and death. The experience transcended mere viewing, creating a sense of participation in divine mysteries that transformed participants' worldviews. The impact of initiation reportedly brought profound peace regarding death. Those who experienced the Eleusinian visions emerged with altered consciousness, understanding mortality not as finality, but as transformation akin to seed becoming harvest. They learned to view death through the agricultural cycle, necessary dissolution before new growth, winter's darkness preceding spring's renewal. While Eleusinian mysteries offered group transformation through annual ritual, Orphic traditions provided more individual paths to wisdom. Named for the legendary musician whose journey to reclaim Eurydice represented the soul's potential for transcendence, these teachings emphasized personal effort towards spiritual evolution. Central to Orphic theology was humanity's dual nature. Mortals contained both titanic elements, inherited from the primordial beings destroyed by Zeus, and Dionysian sparks, divine components from the god dismembered by those same titans. This cosmic tragedy explained both human potential for baseness and capacity for divinity, creating spiritual tension that drove the soul's journey through multiple lives. The Orphic cosmology expanded traditional Greek cosmogony with emphasis on cyclical transformation. Souls descended from divine realms into mortal bodies, accumulated knowledge through multiple incarnations, underwent purification between lives in the underworld, and gradually refined themselves until achieving ultimate reunion with the divine source. This process required active participation rather than passive acceptance of fate. Initiatory practices in Orphic circles included dietary restrictions, particularly abstention from meat and beans. These prohibitions reflected beliefs about the soul's vegetative origins and the need to maintain purification for spiritual progression. Practitioners also wore distinctive white clothing and avoided certain types of burial, believing traditional rites might trap the soul in material cycles rather than facilitating spiritual ascent. Orphic hymns and poems served as tools for soul work, their rhythms and metaphysics designed to reshape consciousness. These sacred texts included detailed maps of the afterlife journey, specific tokens and passwords for navigating underworld challenges, and instructions for achieving liberation from the cycle of rebirth. The gold tablets buried with certain Orphic initiates contained precise directions: what to say to the guardians, which waters to avoid, how to claim divine ancestry when challenged. Unlike the communal experience of Eleusis, Orphic practices often involved solitary devotion and personal ascesis, disciplined training that prepared the soul for its eventual journey. Meditation on specific myths, memorization of sacred formulas, and cultivation of detachment from material existence shaped practitioners into philosophers of death who lived with one foot already in eternity. Pythagoras and his followers synthesized Orphic insights with mathematical mysticism, creating a sophisticated framework for understanding the soul's journey through cosmic order. Where Orphism emphasized mystical experience, Pythagoreanism added rational structure, viewing the universe as musical harmony governed by mathematical principles that souls could learn to comprehend. The Pythagorean cosmos operated through numerical relationships that extended into the afterlife. Souls progressed through spheres of existence numbered according to sacred proportions. The afterlife realm itself possessed geometrical architecture, paths that followed perfect ratios, judgments rendered according to mathematical justice, purifications aligned with harmonic intervals. Understanding these principles allowed for more efficient spiritual evolution. Transmigration of souls became central to Pythagorean doctrine, with reincarnation following precise patterns based on karmic mathematics. The soul carried forward its ethical calculations from life to life, accumulating or diminishing spiritual weight according to action's moral gravity. Underworld purification operated like spiritual mathematics, calculating appropriate remedies for each soul's imbalances. Their practices included communal living in pursuit of harmonic existence. Members studied astronomy, mathematics, and music as tools for soul purification. They believed that understanding cosmic harmony prepared them for the greater harmony experienced after death. The famous theorem attributed to Pythagoras represented not just mathematical truth but metaphysical principle. The relationships between triangular elements reflected deeper truths about soul, cosmos, and divinity. The desire to communicate with the departed gave rise to specialized sites where boundaries between worlds thinned enough for controlled contact. The Necromantian Oracle of the Dead combined religious authority with practical expertise in channeling spirits. These sites operated through specific geographical features that supposedly facilitated communication with the shadowed realm. The Oracle of the Dead at Acheron, located in Epirus, exploited the meeting point of three rivers: Acheron, woe; Phlegethon, fire blazing; and Cocytus, lamentation. Pilgrims underwent multi-day preparations involving fasting, isolation, and ritual cleansing before descending into a network of caverns that simulated underworld geography. The experience culminated in a dark chamber where they hoped to encounter departed relatives or receive prophetic wisdom from ancient heroes. Architectural design enhanced psychological effect. Narrow passages disoriented visitors. Varying floor levels created a sensation of descent. Acoustics amplified whispers into otherworldly voices. Sacred pools reflected firelight in ways that suggested supernatural presence. The entire structure functioned as a theatrical mechanism for inducing liminal states where communication with the dead became psychologically plausible. Rituals followed precise protocols. Inquirers brought offerings specific to their intended respondent: wine for suicides, honey for murdered children, blood for warriors. They recited exact invocations learned from oracle priests. Questions had to follow proper formulation to avoid angering spirits. The priests themselves served as interpreters, trained to distinguish meaningful communications from random phenomena occurring at the threshold of worlds. These practices reflected an evolved understanding of the underworld as permeable when approached correctly, whereas earlier traditions viewed death's realm as sealed except for heroic intrusion. Mystery traditions suggested that appropriate rituals could create temporary openings for beneficial exchange between the living and departed. This accessibility brought underworld wisdom into practical application for mortal concerns. As these various mystery traditions matured, connections and synthesis emerged. Practitioners of different systems often participated in multiple initiations, creating personal amalgamations of esoteric wisdom. The flexibility of Greek religious practice allowed for creative combination of Eleusinian emotion, Orphic theology, Pythagorean mathematics, and practice into individual spiritual paths. The accumulated wisdom traditions reshaped popular understanding of death. No longer was the afterlife simply a destination determined by the gods or fate. Through proper preparation, knowledge acquisition, and ritual practice, souls could actively participate in their own posthumous journey. The underworld became a realm of opportunity rather than merely judgment, a place where continued growth remained possible. This democratization of divine knowledge represented a profound shift in Greek religious consciousness. What had once been heroic prerogative, direct engagement with death's mysteries, became accessible through initiation. The underworld's secrets, transmitted through generations of mystics and philosophers, offered mortals the possibility of transcending their normal boundaries without requiring divine parentage or extraordinary courage. Yet the mysteries maintained their mystery. Even as they systematized approaches to death's wisdom, they insisted that the deepest truths could not be fully expressed in words. Direct experience through ritual, meditation, and careful preparation remained essential. The underworld continued to offer its knowledge, not through simple transmission, but through transformation of those who dared to seek its secrets. Thus, mystery traditions established that death's realm held not just judgment and residence, but education and evolution. The King of Shadows presided over a domain that served cosmic function through individual transformation by offering paths to wisdom while living. These traditions ensured that death, when it came, would find souls prepared for its challenges and opportunities. As mystery traditions offered experiential wisdom, philosophers began to question, analyze, and reinterpret the traditional underworld narratives. What had originated as mythological storytelling gradually transformed into systematic theology and ethical frameworks. These thinkers dared to ask, what if the afterlife reflected not mere divine whim, but cosmic justice operating according to rational principles? The earliest literary presentations of death's realm appear in Homer's epics, where shades exist in diminished form, divorced from the vitality that defined their mortal lives. Achilles' famous lament to Odysseus crystallized this bleakness. He would rather serve as a farm hand among the living than rule over all the dead. This vision emphasized separation. Souls cut off from light, sensation, and meaningful action. The Homeric underworld operated through depletion rather than punishment or reward. All souls, regardless of their earthly status or deeds, wandered through the same asphodel fields. The only distinction came through burial rites. Those denied proper ceremony remained uneasily between worlds rather than accepting shadowy residence. Death became the ultimate equalizer, reducing heroes and kings to insubstantial echoes. This philosophical framework suggested that meaning resided exclusively in mortal existence. The afterlife served merely as a repository for what had been rather than a platform for what might be. Heroes sought Cleos, undying fame earned through deeds that would outlive their physical forms. Yet even this glory existed primarily in memory among the living, offering scant comfort to fated spirits below. Homer's influence persisted precisely because of its stark honesty. Rather than offering comforting illusions about posthumous rewards, his vision faced mortality's bitter reality: consciousness without agency, memory without substance, identity reduced to whispered names. This confrontation with meaninglessness drove both religious innovation and philosophical inquiry. Plato revolutionized underworld theology by infusing it with ethical purpose and metaphysical weight. His myth of air, presented in the Republic, reimagined the afterlife as a cosmic court where divine justice operated through mathematical precision. Souls didn't merely arrive at predetermined destinations. They chose their next incarnations based on wisdom gained through previous lives. The philosopher's vision expanded traditional geography with mechanical sophistication. Souls traversed the spindle of necessity, where the fates sang harmonies that determined cosmic motion. They witnessed judges who pronounced not just on immediate moral worth, but on the soul's capacity for future improvement through experience. The process emphasized education through consequence rather than mere retribution. Plato's innovations included the concept of intermediate purification. Between death and rebirth, souls underwent cleansing proportional to their moral weight. This refinement process operated through both pleasure and pain, ensuring that each soul experienced fully the implications of its choices. The underworld became an alchemical laboratory where spiritual transformation preceded return to embodied existence. His framework suggested afterlife architecture responding to ethical need. Rather than fixed regions, the space organized itself according to the soul's requirements for growth. The most corrupt required the deepest purification, while those nearly perfected needed only minor adjustment before ascending to divine contemplation. This flexibility made cosmic justice simultaneously personal and universal. The philosopher also redefined the purpose of burial customs and mourning. Rather than ensuring proper placement in fixed afterlife domains, these practices should prepare souls for ongoing journeys toward truth. Death marked transition between learning phases rather than final examination. This perspective transformed religious practice from fearful propitiation into wise preparation for continued existence. Stoic philosophers approached death through the lens of natural philosophy, viewing the soul's fate as an expression of logos, divine reason permeating all existence. Their underworld interpretations emphasized rationality and acceptance rather than mystery or reward. Death represented a return to the source, a dissolution of individual identity into the cosmic consciousness from which it had temporarily emerged. Marcus Aurelius characterized death as a simple change of elements. You came into this world as a part, and will depart as part. Accept change as you would seasonal alteration of nature. This perspective dissolved traditional fears about underworld journeys or posthumous judgments. The realm of death existed as a natural phenomenon requiring no separate geography or divine governance. The Stoic afterlife collapsed into an inevitable return to fundamental principles. Just as bodies decomposed into earth, water, air, and fire, souls reintegrated with the universal mind. Individual consciousness might persist briefly during this transition, but ultimately merge with the eternal pattern from which it came. This process carried neither reward nor punishment, merely the completion of natural cycles. Their ethical framework derived motivation from duty rather than fear or hope regarding death. Living according to virtue aligned one with cosmic order in the present moment. Whether individual consciousness survived death became irrelevant compared to fulfilling one's role within the rational universe. The underworld, if it existed at all, operated according to the same logical principles governing all existence. This philosophy offered liberation from superstition while maintaining ethical seriousness. Death couldn't threaten those who understood their fundamental unity with all existence. The underworld lost its power to intimidate or entice, becoming merely another expression of nature's inexorable processes. Sages prepared for death not through ritual or belief, but through philosophical contemplation that revealed mortality's place within eternal reason. In contrast to philosophical abstraction, mystery religions maintained that direct experience of divine truth offered transformation beyond theoretical understanding. These traditions preserved and evolved mythological frameworks while insisting that the deepest wisdom came through initiation rather than analysis. The Dionysian mysteries focused on ego death as preparation for actual mortality. Through ecstatic ritual involving wine, music, and symbolic dismemberment, participants experienced temporary dissolution of individual identity. This practiced death taught that consciousness could survive the loss of habitual selfhood, preparing souls for ultimate transition with reduced fear and resistance. Baksheik rites specifically address the underworld through reenactment of Orpheus's journey. Initiates symbolically descended, died, and were reborn through ritual sequences that collapsed the boundary between mythological narrative and personal transformation. The experience reportedly left participants changed in fundamental ways, fear of death replaced by curiosity about continued existence beyond bodily form. The mysteries of Isis adapted Egyptian wisdom to Greek needs, presenting death as a journey toward reunion with divine principles. The goddess Isis's search for her dismembered consort Osiris paralleled each soul's quest for wholeness. Initiates learned that apparent destruction served necessary purposes in the cosmic renewal cycle. Death became a portal rather than an ending, a passage rather than a destination. These traditions maintained that philosophical speculation couldn't replace experiential knowledge. While thinkers debated underworld topography and theological principles, mystics claimed direct encounter with death's mysteries through sacred drama and altered consciousness. They offered not arguments but transformation, not theories, but wisdom earned through careful preparation and courageous engagement with liminal states. The interplay between philosophical analysis and religious experience created dynamic tension in Greek culture. Temples hosting mystery rituals stood near gymnasia where rational discourse dissected traditional beliefs. Initiates might also study philosophy, while thinkers often sought mystical confirmation of their theories through religious practice. This synthesis produced figures like Plutarch, who served as a priest at Delphi while writing philosophical treatises about divine nature. His works attempted to reconcile mythological tradition with philosophical insight, suggesting that ancient stories contained rational truths perceivable through both reason and revelation. The underworld in this framework operated according to moral law, comprehensible through careful study, yet fully knowable only through sacred experience. Conflicts arose primarily around claims to certainty. Philosophers insisted that reason alone could determine truth about death's nature and consequences. Religious authorities maintained that divine mysteries transcended human logic, requiring submission to revelation. Popular religion often accepted contradictory elements, practicing both philosophical ethics and mystery initiations without feeling obligated to resolve theoretical tensions. This multiplicity of approaches enriched Greek culture's engagement with mortality. Death's realms supported multiple interpretations: rational, mystical, traditional, innovative, allowing individuals to find appropriate paths for their temperaments and circumstances. The underworld became a laboratory where humanity wrestled with its ultimate questions, finding not single answers, but varied wisdom emerging from persistent inquiry. The philosophical evolution thus transformed Hades from mythological setting into a focal point for humanity's deepest contemplations. Whether through Homeric tears, Platonic mathematics, Stoic acceptance, or mystical transformation, each approach reflected humanity's engagement with its own finitude. The realm of death, initially created to house mortal endings, had evolved into a mirror reflecting every culture's highest hopes and deepest fears about existence itself. As Roman civilization expanded, it absorbed and systematized Greek religious concepts while adapting them to distinctly Roman values and sensibilities. The underworld, now called various names, including Aeacus, and eventually associated with wealth through the title Pluto, underwent significant reinterpretation. Roman pragmatism reshaped mystical Greek concepts into more structured, law-oriented visions of the afterlife. The Romans approached divine identification with characteristic practicality, rather than simply adopting Greek names wholesale. They identified functional equivalents within their own religious tradition before accepting the fuller mythological framework. This process created layers of meaning that enriched rather than replaced original concepts. Dispater, the Roman father of riches, initially governed underground wealth, both mineral and agricultural. His early association with soil fertility connected him naturally to mortality through the death and renewal cycle of planting. As Greek influence deepened, Dis absorbed the mythological complexity of the Dark Lord while maintaining his connection to earthly abundance. The title Pluto emerged as a particularly Roman innovation, emphasizing prosperity derived from the realm below. This dual identity as death's ruler and wealth source perfectly matched Roman values that connected material success with divine favor. Temples to Pluto sometimes served as banks where treasures could be safely stored under divine protection, creating a literal connection between the underground deity and monetary fortune. Cerberus retained his basic form and function, but acquired Latin epithets that emphasized different aspects. The Romans called him triceps, three-headed, and associated him with the iron collar used on savage dogs. They developed specific protocols for appeasing him, including special honey cakes called sops, that became standardized ritual practice in ways Greek traditions had not formalized. The ferryman continued his eternal duty under the same name, though Romans depicted him with distinctly Latin features. Their art emphasized his ancient appearance more dramatically than Greek representations, creating ghoulish visages that stressed death's alienation from beauty and youth. The obol coin requirements became codified into specific denominations appropriate for Roman currency. The Aeneid crystallized Roman understanding of the underworld in ways that would influence Western imagination for millennia. Virgil's systematic description of death's realm combined Greek geographical features with Roman organizational principles, creating the most detailed and influential map of the afterlife in classical literature. His entrance at Lake Avernus in Campania became canonical for Roman pilgrims. The volcanic landscape, with its sulfuric emissions and eerie atmosphere, provided convincing physical evidence for supernatural access points. The location aligned with Etruscan sacred geography while offering Romans a domestic portal to divine mysteries previously associated with distant Greek sites. Virgil's structural innovations included the vestibule of the underworld, where various personified sufferings waited to greet arrivals. Here gathered grief, care, disease, old age, fear, hunger, and death itself, abstract concepts given form as preliminary warnings about mortality's companions. This Roman addition emphasized the psychological reality of death's approach before souls reached traditional mythological features. The Sibyl of Cumae, serving as Aeneas's guide through these regions, represented Roman integration of prophetic tradition with underworld navigation. Her role combined Greek oracular wisdom with Etruscan death expertise, creating a figure who understood both the geography and purpose of mortality's domains. Through her, the journey gained didactic purpose. Each site offered a lesson about proper living and dying. Virgil's portrayal of judgment became more nuanced than traditional accounts. While Minos still determined souls' fates, his court now operated with Roman legal precision. Evidence was presented, testimony heard, circumstances considered, all reflecting the judicial processes Romans valued in their earthly courts. The underworld demonstrated that divine justice, like Roman law, operated through careful deliberation rather than arbitrary decree. Roman funeral customs evolved from simple agricultural rituals into elaborate ceremonies that reinforced social hierarchy while honoring the dead. These practices combined ancestral veneration with underworld mythology, creating complex relationships between living families and deceased members. The journey to proper burial began immediately after death. Romans closed the eyes and mouth to seal the soul within until final rites could be performed. They called the name of the deceased 3 times, a practice that tested for premature death while beginning the separation between realms. Coins placed in the mouth served double duty as Charon's fare and as insurance against awakening to find oneself mistakenly buried alive. Funeral processions reflected Roman values of public display and family dignity. The wealthy employed professional mourners, musicians, and even actors wearing death masks of ancestors who had held public office. These images appeared in funeral corteges, creating a visible connection between current death and the lineage of family achievement. Such processions demonstrated that individual mortality served collective continuity. Tomb architecture developed from simple grave markers into elaborate mausolea that rivaled religious temples in scale. These structures served as permanent bridges between worlds, places where living descendants could maintain relationships with departed family members. Inscriptions often addressed passers-by directly, ensuring that strangers would remember the deceased and perhaps offer libations that sustained souls' afterlife existence. The festival of Parentalia exemplified Roman innovation in ancestor worship. For 9 days each February, families visited tombs to offer bread, wine, salt, and flowers while sharing ritual meals with their dead. This institutionalized mourning period transformed Greek underworld concepts into civic religion that bound families together through shared remembrance and collective duty to the departed. Roman culture systematically recontextualized Greek deities to align with their own value systems. Persephone became Proserpina, emphasizing her role as a divine maiden while sometimes diminishing her queenly authority. This shift reflected Roman unease with powerful female figures exercising sovereignty over fundamental cosmic processes. The Roman understanding of Proserpina's journey focused less on cosmic necessity and more on familial duty disrupted and restored. Their versions emphasized Ceres' grief as a mother rather than a goddess, making the myth more personally relatable while embedding it within Roman family values. The agricultural aspects gained prominence over mystical transformation, aligning the story with practical Roman concerns about harvest success. Mercury expanded Hermes' role as psychopomp with characteristically Roman organizational skills. The Romans depicted him with accounting tablets, suggesting that Death's realm operated with bureaucratic precision. Souls weren't merely guided to their destination, but properly registered and assigned according to administrative protocols that would impress Roman civil servants. The Furies underwent significant transformation in Roman hands. While Greeks often portrayed them as primal forces of vengeance, Romans emphasized their role in maintaining social order. They became the diary, witnesses who reported crimes to divine authorities, operating more like celestial prosecutors than autonomous avengers. This change reflected Roman preference for legal process over arbitrary punishment. Hecate retained her position at crossroads but gained distinctly Roman attributes. The Romans created elaborate shrines called Hecatea where 3 roads met, complete with specific offerings and timing requirements. Her role expanded to include household protection, making her less exclusively focused on underworld transitions and more integrated into daily Roman religious life. The Roman imperial cult found natural connections with underworld mythology. Emperors, particularly after deification, needed pathways between earthly authority and divine status. The underworld offered a convenient metaphorical framework for discussing imperial transitions while maintaining religious sensibilities. Divine emperors' connections to wealth, Pluto/Dispater, emphasized their right to command terrestrial resources. Their potential journeys to the underworld upon death gained significance as examples of human potential to transcend mortality through extraordinary achievement. Imperial funerals thus became state occasions, demonstrating proper cosmic transition from mortal ruler to divine protector. The practice of imperial apotheosis required sophisticated integration of Greek underworld concepts with Roman political theology. Souls of extraordinary rulers didn't merely enter Elysium. They ascended directly to divine status, bypassing normal posthumous processing. This elevation created precedent that influential Romans might hope to follow, linking proper behavior in life with extraordinary afterlife rewards. Roman poets employed underworld imagery to praise or criticize contemporary politics, dead heroes becoming examples of civic virtue, while wayward sons joining Tartarus' eternal punishments. The flexible nature of mythological interpretation allowed writers to address current events through traditional narrative frameworks, making underworld stories relevant to imperial concerns. Thus, Roman adaptation transformed Greek underworld concepts into a systematic religious structure that served state ideology while maintaining personal meaning. The realm of death became thoroughly Romanized, more organized, more connected to material wealth, more integrated with family and civic duty. Yet beneath these practical adaptations, the fundamental mysteries persisted, offering Romans both comfort and contemplation as they faced mortality within their expanding empire. The shadow realm that began as a primordial abyss had emerged as one of humanity's most enduring symbolic systems. From chaos through cosmic order into philosophical framework, the Greek underworld journey, completed by Romans, would echo through centuries of subsequent culture. Its transformation from ancient belief into perpetual metaphor demonstrates myth's capacity to adapt while maintaining essential power. As Christianity spread through the Mediterranean world, it encountered well-established underworld concepts that proved both challenge and resource. Church fathers neither ignored nor wholly condemned these traditions, but selectively incorporated elements that aligned with biblical revelation while reinterpreting others within new theological frameworks. The geography of Tartarus found particular resonance with emerging concepts of hell. The eternal torment so precisely matched to specific sins provided templates for Christian imagination of divine punishment. Tantalus's reaching for fruit became a metaphor for souls grasping at salvation without true repentance. Sisyphus's endless labor illustrated the futility of works without faith. The very precision of Greek afterlife justice facilitated translation into Christian moral theology. Purgatory's development borrowed heavily from the Greek concept of purification between lives. The notion that souls could be cleansed through graduated suffering rather than immediately assigned to final destinations aligned with the wisdom of intermediate states found in earlier mysteries. This adaptation allowed for mercy within justice, satisfying both philosophical rigor and pastoral concern for human weakness. The Christian landscape of the dead also preserved beneficent spaces from classical tradition. Elysium's blessed fields found echo in concepts of paradise, while the journey to final judgment maintained structural similarities to Greek precedents. Even the problematic figure of Christ's harrowing of hell, his descent to free righteous souls trapped since ancient times, paralleled heroic underworld journeys that sought to rescue the unjustly detained. Saint Augustine particularly engaged with classical afterlife concepts, spending considerable effort demonstrating how pagan wisdom pointed toward, while ultimately falling short of, Christian revelation. Rather than dismissing Platonic theories of soul purification as mere error, he sought to show how ancient philosophers glimpsed partial truths that found completion in gospel teaching. Medieval imagination fully synthesized classical and Christian elements, creating afterlife visions of unprecedented complexity. Dante's Divine Comedy represents the culmination of this process, where Virgil himself serves as a guide through realms that combine Greek geography with Christian theology, Roman organization with medieval metaphysics. The medieval underworld maintained classical features, rivers of specific purposes, guardians at thresholds, graduated punishments reflecting earthly crimes. Yet these elements gained new significance within a cosmic drama focused entirely on salvation history. Ancient rulers of the dead yielded authority to Christian judgment, while classical heroes became exemplars of virtuous pagans, achieving what earthly wisdom could attain without divine grace. Arthurian legends incorporated underworld motifs into quests for sacred objects. The journey to An, the Celtic otherworld that merged with Greek Hades, became a template for spiritual trials where knights faced their own soul's conditions. These adaptations preserve the essential pattern: descent, testing, transformation, and return, while redirecting purpose toward Christian chivalric ideals. Visual arts particularly demonstrated this synthesis. Medieval illuminated manuscripts depicted hell's geography with attention to architectural detail that exceeded classical precision. Bosch and his contemporaries painted underworld scenes that combined mythological beings with uniquely Christian torments, creating images that simultaneously educated and terrified viewers about mortality's stakes. The mystery play tradition brought underworld dramas directly to medieval communes. These productions made tangible what theological treatises explained abstractly: the soul's journey from judgment through purification or punishment to final assignment. Audiences watched familiar biblical figures interact with classical figures in domains constructed from both traditions. The Renaissance brought renewed interest in classical sources alongside Christian faith, creating space for underworld imagery to regain prominence in its original mythological context. Humanist scholars rediscovered Greek texts that medieval tradition had preserved imperfectly, allowing for more nuanced appreciation of ancient religious psychology. Artists like Michelangelo incorporated Greek underworld figures into Christian contexts with sophisticated theological justification. His Last Judgment includes Charon ferrying souls across the Acheron, demonstrating how classical symbols could illuminate rather than contradict biblical revelation when properly understood. This synthesis showed mature cultural confidence rather than anxious syncretism. Literary works expanded beyond religious instruction to explore psychological dimensions. Shakespeare's ghosts, inhabiting liminal spaces between revenge and rest, borrowed from both classical and medieval traditions. Marlowe's Faustus negotiated with classical demons within a Christian hell, creating dramatic tension through competing systems of divine justice. The period's exploration of consciousness itself drew extensively on underworld metaphors. The soul's dark night, the descent into madness, the journey towards self-knowledge, all employed imagery refined through millennia of mythological development. Renaissance psychology thus continued ancient traditions while directing them toward internal rather than exclusively external realms. Occult traditions underwent a revival that further preserved and elaborated Greek underworld concepts. Alchemical texts described spiritual transformation using the language of death's domain: dissolution, putrefaction, and rebirth. John Dee and other scholarly magicians sought to recreate ancient practices of necromancy while claiming Christian justification for such communications. The Romantic movement transformed underworld symbolism once again, discovering in death's realm perfect metaphors for the newly charted territories of the unconscious mind. Poets and artists found in Orpheus's failed journey the essential drama of artistic creation, the attempt to bring inspiration from darkness into light, always at risk of losing what one sought through premature revelation. Goethe's Faust adapted classical underworld elements within a psychological framework that prefigured depth psychology. The descent into temptation, the encounter with one's shadow, the negotiation with darker aspects of the self, all borrowed mythological structure while exploring emerging concepts of personality's complexity. Gothic literature made extensive use of underworld imagery for atmospheric effect: ruined temples to Hecate, catacombs echoing with lamentations, mysterious pools reflecting faces of the dead. These elements created emotional landscapes where rational boundaries dissolved. The underworld became shorthand for regions where ordinary consciousness could not venture safely. Blake's visionary works explicitly reworked classical mythology within a personal cosmology. His underworld figures operated as psychological forces within every soul rather than external deities governing separate realms. This internalization represented a culmination of a process begun in antiquity: the recognition that death's domain held mirrors to mortal consciousness itself. Coleridge and other Romantic theorists proposed that mythology represented humanity's earliest attempts to map internal experience. The underworld particularly fascinated them as a symbol for the darkness preceding consciousness, the raw material from which civilization and individual awareness emerged. Their interpretations moved deliberately away from literal belief while claiming deeper truth from mythological insight. Contemporary culture continues mining underworld traditions for metaphor, narrative structures, and psychological insight. Jungian psychology particularly embraced classical afterlife imagery as representations of archetypal patterns within the collective unconscious. The hero's journey through death's realm became a template for discussing individuation, the soul's development toward wholeness through confronting its own depths. Popular media, ranging from video games to television series, regularly employ structures inherited from Greek afterlife concepts. The RPG genre especially gratifies players by allowing them to enact heroic descents, face underworld guardians, and emerge transformed. These virtual journeys satisfy psychological needs ancient mystery traditions once addressed through ritual initiation. Literature continues exploring underworld themes with sophisticated awareness of their symbolic potential. Milan Kundera's use of memory as Lethe, Toni Morrison's beloved ghosts, Haruki Murakami's Journeys Beneath Tokyo, all demonstrate how ancient patterns maintain power when applied to contemporary concerns about identity, trauma, and transformation. Visual arts employ classical underworld imagery with deliberate understanding of its accumulated meanings. Contemporary installations might combine Cerberus with surveillance technology, suggesting that ancient guardianship principles operate within modern contexts. These works assume audience familiarity with mythological reference, while questioning its continued relevance. Music across genres frequently references classical underworld journeys. Progressive rock bands construct concept albums around Orpheus's descent. Hip-hop artists employ Tartarus imagery to discuss systemic injustice. These adaptations suggest that Death's realm continues offering narrative and metaphorical resources for artistic expression. The Greek underworld's transformation from mythological place to cultural symbol demonstrates how human imagination processes fundamental questions about mortality. What began as an explanation for what happens after death evolved into a resource for understanding consciousness, ethics, creativity, and transcendence during life. Its persistence across cultural transitions, from pagan to Christian, from religious to psychological, from supernatural to metaphorical, testifies to its applicability at multiple levels of meaning. The realm constructed by ancient imagination addressed concerns so basic to human experience that subsequent cultures found it valuable to adapt rather than abandon. Modern secular society maintains a surprising connection to these ancient patterns. When psychologists discuss exploring one's darker impulses, when artists describe descending to sources of creativity, when seekers undertake journeys of spiritual transformation, they unknowingly echo the structured path that led heroes through Hades' domain. The underworld journey remains a viable template because it addresses psychic realities that transcend historical periods. This legacy suggests that the Greek underworld represents less an outdated belief system than an enduring navigational chart for human consciousness. Its careful mapping of internal territories, guilt, memory, desire, transformation, continues offering guidance for those willing to engage with darkness as a prerequisite for wisdom. The realm beneath has become the depths within, maintaining its power to illuminate even in ages claiming to have transcended its original context. Thus, the underworld stands not merely as a historical curiosity, but as a continuing presence in humanity's attempt to comprehend the incomprehensible. From its origins in primordial darkness, through its crystallization into systematic mythology, to its abstraction into universal symbol, it traces the evolution of human consciousness itself, our eternal quest to bring light to shadows, meaning to mystery, and understanding to the ultimate transition all must eventually undertake. The dark sovereign who first accepted his shadowed kingdom could not have foreseen how his domain would come to illuminate the human condition across millennia. Yet perhaps this transformation represents the ultimate wisdom of the dying realm, that something created to contain endings would become a source of endless beginnings. That a space designed for finality would generate infinite possibility, and that the deepest darkness would reveal humanity's most persistent light. In this way, the Greek underworld completes its journey from mythological geography to psychological truth, from ancient belief to eternal metaphor. Its story, like the souls it was created to receive, finds not ending but transformation. The realm beneath becomes the wisdom within. The kingdom of shadows illuminates the light of understanding, and death's domain teaches us how to live. Thus concludes the long tale of the Greek underworld. Yet, like all true stories of mortality's mystery, It contains no real ending, only the invitation to continue descending into wisdom, ascending through transformation, and discovering that the journey through death leads always back to life.